Hello and welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast. I am Derek, one of your regular hosts, and I got my buddy Ryan here with me. Hey, Ryan.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome back. We took a month off, but we are back to talk more Nick
Yes,
Cage.
we are back.
This week, we are talking about the 1984 film Racing with the Moon, which stars Sean Penn, Elizabeth McGovern, and Nicolas Cage. The short synopsis of the film is in 1942 California, two young men await induction into the U.S. Marines and say goodbye to their girlfriends, which is a terrible synopsis for the movie, in my opinion, but hey, what are you going to do?
It's also like Nick Cage's, I think, fifth movie or something, fifth credit on IMDb. I think this is our new earliest.
Is this the earliest one we've done so far?
I know Cotton Club was the same year, but this one was listed before Cotton Club.
Yes. Yeah. So that's all right. This is the earliest one we've done so far. Very nice.
Yeah.
So,
and Derek has watched it twice. So I'm expecting a lot of very good insight.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I accidentally watched this a few months ago. It was a mistake. I had misremembered what movie popped up. And rather than just watch our own Wheel O' Cage, I decided to just go with my gut, which was wrong. My gut was wrong.
Right.
But hey, what are you going to do? So what do we do? What do we do is we talk the Nicolas Cage movie. Ryan has painstakingly taken meticulous notes, and we'll go through those notes.
And I have my love letters to Nicolas Cage notepad that I take all my notes on. So
lovely.
Great.
I love it. That's great.
And that was not a great moment for audio listeners, but yeah, I literally have a journal that is like all romantic looking and says love letters to Nicolas Cage with his face in one of the letters. So,
well, that's great.
That. Yeah.
I think it looks lovely.
It can be found online.
It can, yeah.
I'm assuming it was a gift. I don't know.
This is the first episode we're going to release any video footage from. Just in time for TikTok to be taken down. But yeah, it's gonna be great. This was your idea, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I'm regretting it
already.
All right. So my first note on this movie is angsty Sean Penn.
Very angsty.
Because like the first scene in this movie, it's like just him walking down the railroad tracks with a cigarette. Yep. Lots of smoking in this movie.
Tons of smoking.
But he's just walking down the railroad tracks, and he runs into some kids that are like trying to crush coins. They used to do that, put coins on the track and have the train run over it and then have a smashed coin, I guess. Mm-hmm. I did that in Boy Scouts once, but then I learned you weren't supposed to do that. That was actually Cub Scouts, maybe. I can't remember. In my Scouts career somewhere, I did do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's 1942. There wasn't much else for those kids to do.
That's true. Yeah. And so, yeah, he just kind of stands there and stares at him.
It is an awkward freaking scene.
There's actually there's a lot of awkward scenes in this movie. So this is the first of many, but yeah, it's a very odd scene.
Yeah, it sets the tone for me. Like no one talks to anybody. The kids aren't even really talking to each other. There's just lots of like looks. Everyone's looking at each other. No one's saying anything. Everything takes forever in this scene. Mm-hmm. We have to watch the train approach. We have to watch the train go by.
And we're in suspense as to whether he's going to stay on the tracks or get off the tracks when the train comes by. This isn't the only time that happens in this movie. So, and then my next note, well, I had smoking as my second note because, I like to point that out. And then my third note was, I hope there was a point to that scene. Spoiler alert, there was not. It had no relevance to literally anything in the movie.
So I think I know why it's there. So the train is important later on in the movie in two other scenes. And they had to actually restore this train for the movie. And I think they were just looking for excuses to use it because it cost them a lot of money.
Maybe. I do have some comments about the trains later in the movie because I feel like the person that directed this maybe or somebody on set wanted it to have more significance or like tonal themes. So we'll touch on that later for sure.
Interesting.
So then we get a scene of this angsty guy not being so angsty and playing piano with a teacher. Mm-hmm. And the teacher seems to be, teaching until the kid starts playing some, evil rock and roll music or something like
That's
that.
right.
And then
Yeah.
the teacher storms out.
Oh, but not before he storms out, though. The mother, who's in the kitchen, of course, because it's the 1940s, drops and breaks some dishes in the horror of her son playing some rock and roll on the piano.
Sure, devil music.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie's a little heavy-handed when it comes to 1940s family themes.
It's true. And while he's playing piano, there's a dog that's listening to him, and it's very cute.
We get two dogs pretty early on in this movie, which, would normally, that would be a positive.
And then Henry is Sean Penn's character.
Hopper.
Yeah, Hopper. His dad confuses him with the dog. He calls him the dog's name.
Argus.
So weird scene. But
yeah,
I guess it's meant to show how little connection that they have with him, and he's just kind of doing his own thing. I don't really know why they did that, but
I've seen this twice, and both times I was like, maybe he said it backwards and he's like screwing with his dad, but no.
Nope. So then he like leaves the house after this whole fiasco with the broken dishes and the rock and roll music. And he goes to this place that looks like it's on the edge of like a lake or something. There's like a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And
they call it the point.
Yeah, they call that. But there's a woman doing yoga or some sort of weird stretching in the 40s on the edge. And it just like shows her for a little while. And I think he says hi or something and then moves on.
Yeah, well, he does not say hi to her. He just sees her in the distance,
stares at her,
and just stares at her for
there's
a
lot
time.
Of that. Yeah,
there's a lot of staring. Yeah.
So, but he's on his way to his job, one of his jobs,
right?
Which is working at a bowling alley. Well, this was in the 40s before you had the pins automatically reset. So you had two really jacked guys behind the pins that were constantly setting up the pins for you. And
No, go ahead.
Nick Cage is his friend. He's kind of a piece of shit in this movie.
Huge.
Just like he is in every movie almost. But he is jacked. He looks good.
He does. Yeah, he's young, he's buff, he's covered in grease, and he's dressed very much like he was in the kitchen scene of Moonstruck.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I saw him, I was like, I lost my hand, because I thought he was going to lose his hand in a bowling pin accident or something.
Yeah, no, he looks exactly like that. It's like that they were trying to mimic that scene in Moonstruck, basically, that look.
It seems like it. Yeah, they really liked the way he looked there.
And to tell you how I feel about this movie, the most interesting part of the movie for me, I think, is learning how bowling alleys were handled in the 1940s before we had mechanical resets for the pins. That's where the movie sits for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I didn't know that's how it worked either, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So then this bowler starts slinging bowling balls at Hopper, like to fuck with him, and it shows him for like a split second. You don't get a good look, and I'm like, and my next note is that Crispin Glover?
And it is.
It is.
It is.
He's just credited as Gatsby Boy.
This is pre-Back to the Future Crispin Glover.
Same year.
I thought Back to the Future was 85.
Maybe it is. Within a year.
Back to the Future is 85.
Either way, Crispin looks extremely different
in
this movie than he did in Back to the Future. Like a totally different person.
He looks like a star football player or something.
Second guess myself asking if it was Crispin Glover a couple times, because I was like, the face looks the same, but he just looks very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And Back to the Future was within a year of this movie, so it's very odd.
Yeah. It's a completely different character for him, but he plays this total jerk who's just like, while Hopper's trying to set up the pins, he just keeps throwing the ball down the lanes, and there's no way to really stop that, and the ball's going to hit Hopper if he doesn't move out of the way.
Right.
So he's a huge ass.
Eventually he gets fed up with that, and Hopper does, and he goes and punches Crispin Glover in the face.
Breaks his nose.
He bleeds all over his girlfriend, and then Nick Cage goes behind him. Did you pick this up?
The second time I did. I missed it the first time.
He just like goes over and he's helping his girlfriend clean up, this other guy, Crispin Glover's girlfriend, clean off her shirt, and he literally like wipes her shirt off, and then is turning to leave. He like grabs her breast.
Yep.
Like very obviously, and then turns away. So I
That
had
scene
Nick
sets
Cage
up
boob grab for the next note.
this scene sets up two key things for me. One, it sets up the tone of Nick Cage's character, Nicky, like
Yes.
just the
Which,
kind of
so
guy
creative of a name.
that he is. Um, and two, it sets up the rich poor kind of undertones of the
Dynamic,
movie,
yeah.
right? Because Crispin Glover's character, he's the rich guys, which I guess means they don't have jobs at all or something. I don't know. And obviously Hopper and Nicky are the poor guys, so they work in the bowling alley.
And other places also, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, well, Hopper's other job is at the cemetery where his dad works. So I don't know if he's doing that like officially or if he's just helping out his dad. That's unclear.
Well, seems illegal to go over and help somebody without their job and not get paid for it. But
I mean, it was 1942.
there were still laws in 1942.
Yeah, but I don't know like, if that was covered.
Then we get Black Eye Nick Cage, which is something
Yep.
that's never really. They're basically setting it up like he's abused at home.
Well, they say that. Yeah, his dad's been drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but that there's never any payoff. We never meet his parents, I don't think, or
Well, his mom's dead. She died.
Right.
Right. And so it's just the two of them. And he never remember his whole thing is that he never wants to come back after the war. He's not coming back. He wants to stay far away kind of thing. He never wants to see his dad again. So I think like there's supposed to be more to that. But
yeah, it seems like they were trying to explore that a bit. And yeah, I guess we should mention at this point that they are both enlisted to go to the war, and they're both like a few weeks out.
Yep.
They're going in together, I think, as Marines or something like that.
My big problem though with the abusive dad piece for me is because it doesn't go anywhere. It comes off to me like they're trying to make him more sympathetic for being like the horrible person he is throughout this movie.
Well, but that's nothing new. They do that. They did that in a lot of his of these movies we watched, and they try and make him sympathetic so that he doesn't look like a giant piece of shit when there's probably bigger pieces of shit in the movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they try and make him slightly less bad.
But
so
I think he's the worst one. I think he's the worst
in
one
this one. I think he probably is. Yeah. I don't think, especially by the end, you're like, I don't think there's any redeeming this guy.
No.
So then he decides to go to a movie. Hopper does.
Yeah.
And there's this really awkward exchange with the ticket clerk. And I mean, at this point, I didn't know that this person was going to be a bigger role, but there's just like a really awkward exchange where he buys a ticket and he just stares at her for a little bit while she's reading a book.
Yeah.
And then he wants one ticket and he goes in and watches I don't even know if he watches the movie. He comes out and leaves a flower on the ticket desk for her. And she doesn't see who it is because she's so engrossed in this book.
There's a lot of like just leering or staring longingly at people without them noticing.
Yeah. Which I think was a thing in the 40s. I don't know.
Again, they didn't have much to do.
So then we get a scene of him walking his dog, I'm assuming like the next day. And for some reason, his dog is wearing an aviator cap and goggles.
It was his birthday.
Right, but that doesn't actually mean anything.
I know, but the movie sure says it does.
Yeah, somebody asks why he's wearing those, and he says because it's his birthday, and then that's it. We're just supposed to believe that this dog really wanted to wear an aviator cap and goggles when it's really probably more of a punishment.
Yeah, that's
it was cute. Don't get me wrong, it was very
adorable.
Cute. Yeah, I love it. But yeah, it's a really just a random thing. Again, it has no significance to anything. He's not going into the Air Force.
No, it's all just though there isn't a real big emphasis on the planes that are being used, even though these guys are not going into the Air Force.
Right. That he knows
pilots in any way.
I don't think I have any notes about that, but yeah, he definitely does. Every time Hopper sees a plane or something above, he immediately knows like what plane it is and like facts about it, fun facts.
If you're he even corrects Nicky at one point.
Right.
Right. It's like, I don't know why he wouldn't have tried to become a pilot then.
You would think. It seemed like they were setting that up, then he was going to be a grunt in the Marines or whatever. So
yeah, very strange.
So he leaves another flower on this girl's ticket thing because apparently now he's obsessed with her and is across the street eating with Nicky or just hanging out at the shop, whatever.
Well, he pays a kid to leave the flower.
That's what it is.
Right.
Yeah,
now, this guy, he's 18. Sean Penn Hopper is 18, right? He's not a kid. He's 18.
He's a kid compared to us.
Okay, yeah, well, we're old, but
That's true.
but like he hires like a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, maybe 10-year-old, I guess, to like give this flower to this girl across the street.
Yeah. And then she starts walking across the street to the shop that that Hopper's at with Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
And so he panics and puts on like a hat, like he works there, and jumps behind the counter because the counter person is sleeping.
I mean, what would you do?
Or dead.
That
I
makes
mean,
you
I don't, it's never really explained why he just doesn't wake up with all this commotion around him. And she asks for a piece of pie and asks what they have. And he just says, brown. And she says, okay, I'll take a slice of that. Which is a little weird.
Why would you?
Yeah, that sounds like poop pie to me. Like somebody just took a dumpy in a pie and that's what they're serving. Like brown pie. Like even in the 40s, people weren't stupid then.
Well, and she's not. This is Caddy. This is Elizabeth McGovern's character. She's not dumb. She's shown to be intelligent throughout the whole film. Not always making the best decisions necessarily, but she's a smart person.
Right. And so he starts to cut the pie and realizes he apparently doesn't know how to cut a pie because why would he? I mean, that's a totally advanced skill that not just anybody can do. And so he just wraps up a whole pie and gives it to her. And she says, I only wanted one piece. And he's like, oh, it's on special. And she's like, okay, I get a whole pie on special, but I didn't pay anything. So that's a really good special.
Yeah. And he doesn't seemingly pay for it either. So I think he just steals a pie.
Straight out steals a pie. And then follows her all the way to her house. Casual stalking is my next note.
He hops on the back of the bus and holds on to the back of the bus.
And yeah, you can see her in the bus and it's like showing him through the glass. Super creepy.
It's so creepy.
Yeah.
And to Nikki's credit, I will give Nikki this. Nikki is a come with guy. He is there for Hopper through and through, and he is following that bus in his car.
Yeah, he is. And he's casual stalking is my next note. Yeah, he just follows her all the way to her house, watches her creepily walk up to her house, and somehow she doesn't notice like Nikki flying up in this car.
Nope. Or them talking in the quiet.
Like, talking about her. Yeah. It's very weird.
It's all very strange. And of course, this is when we learn that she lives in a very nice house.
Yes. And they call her a Gatsby, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to the Great Gatsby.
I imagine.
Which probably was popular at that time. I don't know.
The thing that really gets me is, first off, they don't know that she lives there yet. They know that she went there. So physically entering a mansion does not make one rich. So they're making a lot of assumptions very quickly here about this woman. They don't even know her name yet.
Right. Yeah. And so the next day he goes and it shows him in the morning, his dad grave digging and he's grave digging. Mm-hmm. So I had my next note. So he's a grave digger and a pin setter, which apparently is a fact. I don't really know why I made that a note, but at the time, I found it interesting that he was working both of these random jobs. Mm-hmm. So at some point during this day, he goes to the library. I don't remember how he figured out she's at the library.
I think he just sees, he's staring again. So he's plane watching with some binoculars, and then he ends up looking at a bus that's driving up, and she happens to get off the bus.
Because apparently this town only has 7 people in it.
Yeah, the whole town. And so then he follows her with his binoculars and she goes into the library, and because he's stalking her, just runs over into the library and grabs the very first book he finds without even bothering to look and see what it was.
Right. And so he introduces himself to her and she knows who he is. I'm guessing from school or something.
No, she doesn't know him. So that's the thing. So he tries to introduce himself and she goes, I don't date strangers. Because he asks her name. He goes, hey, what's your name? She goes, I don't date strangers.
It was her friend that knew him.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay. That's what it was.
And he goes, well, I didn't ask you out. I asked you what your name is, or whatever, however it goes. Which I want to point this out because she goes very, very quickly from I won't even tell this person my name to sleeping with him in like 48 hours.
Well, that's a spoiler, Derek. We haven't gotten there yet. My goodness. So, Yeah, he introduced himself to her, and she's very kind of standoffish, rightfully so. But then later she tells her friend, they're at like a soda jerk or whatever it's called, whatever,
Yeah.
it's a place that serves soda. And
It's the shop where she got the pie.
right. Oh, is that the same shop?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and she's talking to her friend, and she tells him about this weird encounter with Henry Hopper or whatever is the, and the friend's like, "Oh, Hopper," and
It's like,
he walks
didn't
in.
think he could read.
Yeah, he walks in conveniently right at that time, and they're like, "Oh, we should invite him to this Christmas party." And it's kind of set up to think that she's going to invite him, but in turn, what it turns out to be is that she's inviting him for her friend.
Which
and
is,
so
I can't tell if that was really sneaky of her or if she was that naive.
well, also, like, it's not like her friend. They made it seem like, I don't know, the way the whole movie was set up was that Caddy was like this gorgeous, like this guy wants her so bad, so she's got to be this most attractive. And this other girl was not unattractive.
No.
I mean, it was trying to set her up as like the ugly friend. Like, we have to get her a date with, somebody, kind of thing. I don't know. That's the way I took it anyway. It's very odd. But they ask him what he's doing on Christmas. And he tells them that his dad is fishing. And they believe that. So very odd. But apparently the Christmas party is roller skating. So, and he doesn't know how to roller skate, but he tells him he does, because you can't be a man and be inept at something.
And he's already lying to her, so you might as well just keep it going.
You have to have every skill to be an actual man in the 40s. Apparently, there
were only 3 hobbies, so
apparently stalking is number one.
Stalking, plane watching, and roller skating.
Yeah, exactly. And he hadn't done number 3 yet, so he's really only good at 2. Yeah. So at this point, I still have no idea what the plot of this movie is, because I genuinely, and I feel like I made that note for several movies, which is scary at this point. Because I feel like at this point we're like 45 minutes in, and I still genuinely had no idea what the plot of this movie was. And even now, I don't think I know what the actual plot was supposed to be. I mean, I know of things that happened in the movie.
Right.
But there wasn't any character growth throughout the movie for anybody, really. I mean, it would, anyway, yes, I still, at this point, 45 minutes in or however long it was, had no idea what was going on in this movie in terms of like what the overarching story was.
No, it's very unclear. And to a point, I think this is a very good point that you made. I don't think anybody grows in any way at all.
No, they're all still the same as they were at the beginning of the movie, except now they're with other people.
Well, one person is.
Well, yeah, exactly. So he's supposed to be here with this other girl, but then immediately he goes outside. Well, he has the traditional accident or whatever at the skating rink where he goes flying out the door because he can't stop himself.
That was pretty
sure,
funny.
I guess. But I mean, we've seen it a million times in movies. It's, kind of predictable. And so he doesn't know how to skate. Of course, they're going to go flying off somewhere because that's just how it works.
Yeah.
But yeah, he goes outside and she goes out to help him in. Not the girl he was supposed to be with, but Caddy, the girl that he's obsessed with. And my next note is, who is your daddy and what does he do? Because she basically says that exact line to him. That's a reference to Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop, if you aren't familiar. But she basically says, she asked him about the fishing. And he says something like, and she says like, who's your father and what does he do? Or something like that. It was like almost the exact line from Arnold Schwarzenegger. I just thought it was funny.
To be fair, this was first. So maybe Kindergarten Cop ripped off Racing with the Moon.
They must have. Yeah. That's the only logical answer.
And
then my next one is Tank Top Nick Cage, which, I mean, we get a good amount of that in this movie, so I'm not sure why it was so special in this moment, but really it must have just struck me. Maybe his muscles were extra shiny.
Maybe he wasn't as dirty yet, so you got a better look. You
got the clean, sweaty look.
Clean Cage.
Yeah, exactly. So then he takes her, I don't remember if it was that night or what, but he takes her to this like abandoned bar that apparently doesn't have a wall and just like overlooks that cliff.
Right. Yeah.
It's this old bar that's like run down and apparently it's falling apart because it doesn't have a wall. And there's a piano in here that's untouched and
That
like
still
a bed,
works,
a
apparently.
creepy bed that's in there. And you know what this is. This place has got to be like his place. He takes all the women to make love to them or whatever.
Well, Nikki at least. I don't know that Hopper does, but
That's true. Who
yeah.
knows? Yeah, then he seductively plays piano with her at this abandoned bar, and they are like looking at each other longingly, and she's like, oh no, I have to go. And then like goes over to the ladder, which is probably like 100 feet tall. I don't know. They never really show how long it is, but she literally has to leave out there in a ladder because how else would you have your creepy place? I'm surprised he didn't like throw the ladder away so she couldn't get away based on everything else in this movie.
I'm sure it was attached, or he would have.
Maybe. I don't know. And at this point, we find out that she works for the Gatsbys, the quote unquote Gatsbys. Her mom works at this house, and so she lives there.
We learn that. Hopper doesn't.
Right. He doesn't learn that. We learn that. We didn't know that at this point. We assumed she is one of the Gatsbys because that's what we were shown. But yeah, at this point, we learn her mother works there. And yeah. So then they go on another date, and he like takes her on a walk through the woods with a map. I think they had a map. And then there's like a random, so there's supposed to be a tree that points in the right direction with an arrow, but instead the arrow just points up.
Yeah, and they blame Nikki for that, but it's unclear if he put the sign on badly or the tree just fell over.
Right, or like maybe the wind, it looked like it was held on by like a single nail, so the wind could just like spin it.
Sure, that too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then he's like, I think it's this direction, and he goes out to this pond, and they just start swimming in this pond. Like, I guess people did that in the 40s. That seems like really disgusting to me. You're just going to go into a pond that looks like it's green, like it's got green crap floating on it, and you're like, let's just swim naked.
I mean, we live in the Midwest. I'm sure people do that.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not going to say I've never swam in a random body of water, but if it was like floating with green crap, I probably wouldn't swim in it, or I'd be less likely to.
Fair enough.
So then we get Sean Penn butt.
We do.
Because apparently he's skinny dipping. And they have to show that running into the pond. And then we get boobs.
We do.
This is a PG movie, by the way.
Because it's pre PG-13. This came out the same year as Ghostbusters.
Right. So we get not only Sean Penn butt, but we also get Elizabeth McGovern boobs. And it's also January, apparently, at this point in the movie. And they're having to be fair, they filmed it.
They filmed it in winter as well. So this was legit.
Everything was very cold.
Yes.
Take that however you want to take that. But yes, why would they go swimming in a random pond in January in a place that does not look like it's warm in January? He wanted to see some titties, I guess. I don't know. But then
I mean, he absolutely brought her there to sleep with her. There's no question that he had any other motive at all.
Yeah. And he tells her about how his dad used to make maps, treasure maps, and then hide stuff. And it was just like basically, or at least he thought it was just to give his father was giving him like locations and interesting like places to go to. And he didn't really care if he found the things that his dad hid there or whatever, which is interesting. I actually thought that was a cool part of the movie, but they never really expand on that. There's like one other scene that references it, and that's it.
The best parts of the movie are like on the edges.
Right. The outskirts of the movie. So then we get drunk Nick Cage. I don't remember the circumstance in this one. It just says drunk Nick Cage.
I mean,
he drinks a lot.
Yeah, he drinks throughout most of the movie. I mean, I guess we did skip over a few things where Nicky's got this girl that he's trying to take out, right?
Oh, yeah. I kind of left some of that stuff out because it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's fair. I think it's important to illustrate just like for his case, since, this is a Nick Cage podcast, right? To kind of show the kind of guy he is, right? So he wants to take this girl out. Her parents are not comfortable with that. And to trick her parents, he pressures Hopper into going with Annie, who is the local prostitute, played by Carol Kane, by the way. So that's a fun little role for Carol Kane. And she seems like a perfectly lovely person and everything, but it's, it's the 1940s and this is a very conservative, buttoned up parental couple. and Annie certainly seems to stick out in that time period. And it's a very awkward scene. And basically at that point, after the parents are tricked, Nikki just kind of shoves Hopper and Annie out of the car and is like, all right, see ya, and goes and, well, we'll find out later.
Yeah, well, that wasn't necessarily the uncomfortable part that I was talking about. The
Oh,
stuff we find out about
yeah.
is the uncomfortable part, and we'll have to hit that because I don't know if I have any if I don't know if I have any notes about that. It is probably what the plot of the movie is supposed to be, but it's a really weird thing to hinge a whole plot on, especially with that description they have of the movie that doesn't really allude to how dark that is.
Well, and it's about the secondary character. Like, Nikki is not the star. He's the
Right.
right? He's the, whatever. Not, you know what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah. He's a secondary character. So this is another scene when they
Supporting. There we go.
walk on the railroad tracks.
Uh-huh.
And he's drunk. Nikki's drunk. I don't think Hopper's drunk at this point. Maybe he is. But then at some point we get some like really nice Nick Cage abs. Like he was looking sharp back then. I mean, he was cut. And this is what I don't understand. People were asking about, in Ghost Rider if his abs were CG. And we haven't covered Ghost Rider yet. I'm sure we will when we cover the first one. But, and I know it came a lot later, but clearly this man has experience with conditioning his body. And not only that, he's a Hollywood actor. And if you're going to play a superhero, chances are they're going to pay for you to have a trainer to get you in some sort of superhero shape. So those abs in Ghost Rider, I will fight to my dying breath that they were real. And yeah, this is evidence towards that. I mean, the guy is obviously able to have abs.
I don't think he gets the credit he deserves from a physical perspective because he's not the stereotypical like Hollywood hunk.
No, but I mean, he was an action star for a while.
But I would argue that he was kind of that from an atypical perspective.
Sure, his body type was not like the traditional action star in that time. It's kind of like him and old Jack Burton.
Yeah.
They didn't really have, like, you had Arnold Schwarzenegger, we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but
a little bit,
you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, you had Sylvester Stallone, you had Kurt Russell, who had a different body type than those two, obviously, but those were like the two big ones at the time. Kurt Russell and Nick Cage, they were all, kind of late 80s, early 90s action stars, but Nick Cage definitely had like the most different body type.
Right. And so I think if you look like, Moonstruck, dude is in really good shape in Moonstruck, which is a few years after this.
It could happen to you. He was still in really good shape. And I mean, that was early 90s. I think.
92, 93, something like that. Right.
Yeah.
In the trifecta, right. Face Off and, the Rock and Con Air, he's in great shape in Con Air.
Right. But not like bodybuilder shape.
I mean, we don't really see him with his shirt off, so it's hard to say.
Well, in Con Air, you see him in a tank top. So, I mean,
it's pretty good.
He looks good, but he's not like Arnold.
No,
you know what I mean.
No. So Arnold's Mr. Universe,
It's a different look for sure. Is all I'm saying. So yeah, I think you're right that he doesn't get that credit because he wasn't Sly,
right?
He wasn't Arnie. His whole career wasn't built on his body.
But I think the dude knows how to be in good shape, and if you look at even now, Pig's not a great example, right? But if you look at him in, Unbearable Weight, like he still looks pretty good. Dude looks good.
Yeah, and he's not a young man anymore. No. I mean, but he's maintaining. Yeah, but yeah, we're on a tangent. Yeah. But yes, in this movie, he looks really good. And Derek and I, being children of the '80s and the Arnold and Sly era, we can appreciate when somebody is in good shape for sure. And he is. And this was pre common steroid usage for actors and things like that. So it's much harder to get in that kind of shape. But yeah, he looked great in this. And so when they were walking on this railroad track, it felt to me like they were setting up Nikki to get hit by a train doing something stupid.
Oh shit!
Thank goodness that didn't happen. But that was what it looked like. It looked like the story. Like at this point, I still hadn't figured out the plot, and I thought the plot was going to be like him losing his friend. And like latching onto this girl, yeah, exactly, and developing this kinship with this girl, and maybe being obsessed because he needed somebody to latch onto, something along those lines, some sort of relationship drama. But that is not what happens. He does not die. So okay, so here's where we get into the dark stuff because I did have a note about it.
Well, but I think though, this is where the name of the film comes from, is that scene though, because they're racing the train, right? And they jump onto the train and they jump off the train. Like that's the racing, right?
Sure.
So
What's the moon then?
Wherever the train will take you.
That okay. So we got the racing part at least, but they
night?
should just clearly they should have called it racing. But not every time they chase the train is it at night. So that doesn't.
No,
make
just
any
once.
Sense. Okay. So while Nick Cage is walking around, while Nicky is walking around with Hopper, he drunk, and Hopper's I think had some drinks too. I don't know that he's quite as drunk as Nicky is, but he reveals that he got this girl pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And that they want to get an abortion, and it's going to cost $150.
Yeah. For what he calls a, quote, clean one.
Yes. And the way they treat abortion in this movie is very, I mean, granted, in the 40s, it was like a back alley thing. It wasn't like you go to a doctor's office. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can't do that right now in the United States either, in most states. But that just makes it a little more like that abortion is a common topic in our world right now. So this has some relevance to that. But the way they talk about it is very weird. And it definitely made me uncomfortable. And maybe that was the point.
I mean,
what did you think?
It didn't really make me uncomfortable per se. I didn't really care for how flippant Nicky was about the whole
maybe
thing.
That's what it was.
Because the whole focus is on the guys, right? Like we don't even, the woman that he takes out, I mean, I don't even remember her name. I don't even remember if she speaks at any point. Is it Sally? I think it's Sally. Like we don't get to know anything about her. Like she does later when she gets it, she says she doesn't want him in the room. That might be like her only actual line.
Yeah, it's very weird.
So like, I don't really appreciate how the movie frames it. Like we get very little perspective from women, even the woman directly involved in it. And it's all just about how do we get the money to solve this problem for Nicky?
Right. The plot is getting the money so that they can, I don't want to get into the political side of it, but essentially remove a fetus from this woman. And they have 3 weeks to do it or something like that.
They have a couple of weeks. Right. And it's like, oh, well, lucky for us, Hopper is dating this Gatsby girl that we think is rich.
Right. And you feel like at this point that eventually he's going to ask her, but he's avoiding it.
Right.
But just for reference, $150, which is what they said that this abortion would cost back then in 1942, is equivalent to $2,872 today. So take that for whatever it's worth.
Inflation, and these guys are supposed to be, pretty poor, right? Hopper doesn't have a car. They both work at that bowling alley, right? Nicky doesn't own the car. It's his dad's car, right? And they're both about to go off to war. So they don't really have any money.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't really remember the context of this next note. I remember the scene.
Okay.
Because it was delightful. But in a sea of just depressing movie, we get a Nick Cage dance scene. He's singing with a broomstick, like, or a mop or something. He's like singing some song and using the mop as like a microphone. And then he just starts dancing.
I don't remember that scene.
How do you not remember the scene? It's the cagiest scene in the entire movie.
Maybe because it just seems so disconnected from the rest of the film.
It is absolutely disconnected from the rest of the film. But he starts doing this ridiculous dance that isn't really anything. I don't know what it was, but it was delightful. And yeah, we don't get a lot of caginess in this movie, but that scene was definitely very cagey.
Huh.
I don't know how you missed it or how you can't remember it. Because I don't remember much about this movie, but I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most memorable movie that we've watched.
Yeah, that's fair. But that was a memorable scene in an otherwise unremarkable film.
Fair.
So then they're doing like a war drill or something at the school.
God, that seems so dumb.
Where they have like fake nurses, like the students are nurses, pretending to be nurses.
So the nurses are in training. The patients are pretending to be injured.
That's right. That's what
those are supposed to be like nurses in training.
Okay. yeah, so they're trying to train these nurses that are going to go off to the war, assumedly. I don't really know. But yeah, so Nikki and Hopper are playing victims.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're covered in blood and whatever else. And so they at some point just decide that they're not going to do this anymore and get up and go and like jack the record player, which is playing like war sounds, essentially, like
Yeah.
alarms and bombs going off and things like that. And they start playing some like jazz number or
Mm-hmm.
something and running away and giggling.
And then they cut to everybody's just up dancing all of a
Yeah.
sudden.
And then there's like just this random dance scene.
It's like it's a flash mob in 1942. But I think it's important to point out. So at this point, they're trying to figure out if they can come up with the money for this abortion. And meanwhile, he's like hitting on all these nurses. He's grabbing at them. He's making passes at them and stuff. So like we've gotten to a point now where he goes out with this girl whose parents are overprotective. He gets her pregnant, has no interest in being a part of her life in any way at all, has completely written her off and is already chasing other women within like a week. Not even.
Yeah. So with that random Nick Cage dance scene that I was talking about, I was actually wrong. The scene I'm referencing when I had random dance scene in my notes was all those students getting up and dancing who just seconds before were pretending to be victims.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
So then while he's still in all this makeup and stuff, he runs to the library because he has to
Hopper does.
Hopper does. He has to play a joke on Caddy, and he like makes her think that he's really hurt, and then he starts laughing.
She does not find that funny.
She doesn't find it funny. She gets pissed off, and so she takes a bunch of books and says, "Come with me." And they go to this hospital. Mm-hmm. It's like a field hospital, but there's no war happening in this town, so I'm not sure what's going on. But there's a bunch of like people that have been injured, like assumedly in the war.
I think these are guys who have come back.
Okay,
they were injured.
They seem pretty freshly wounded, but
yeah.
So then he's like talking. She's like walking around, handing books to people, talking, being very friendly, very personable. She was pretty likable in this movie, actually, but she in this scene was really good. She was talking to all these guys that had just come back from the war, and he feels very uncomfortable here. And he brings a book over to Michael Madsen, which was a nice cameo. Well, I don't know if it's a cameo because I don't think he was really popular at this point. You'd know him from Kill Bill and some other Quentin Tarantino movies. But he lost a leg in the war. And you kind of get the implication that Caddy was trying to make him see what could happen to him in the war and make it a little more real, so that because he was so flippant and joking about like getting injured.
Mm-hmm.
And she cares about him at this point. They had sex on the side of a dirty pond after skinny dipping there, so they're really into it at this point.
That's right.
So yeah. We get yet another railroad track scene. Well, he gets upset with her and like runs out,
mm-hmm.
abandons her. And then we get him walking on railroad tracks again. And this is where I started to go, okay, there's got to be something with these railroad tracks because they keep showing like them.
Basic metaphor of like this, like that they take you places, you know, they're like they take you to destinations and he's on the journey of life kind of nonsense.
So I think so. I think I went a little different direction with it than you did. I think that the track symbol is supposed to symbolize different branching paths in life because in the earlier scenes when it's shown on a railroad track, there's just one track. At this point where he runs out from this girl, that had just pissed him off, there's multiple tracks. They all converge. It's like one of those switching things. And
good
so
catch.
I feel like the symbolism there was just that, you know, he has a choice now of which path he's going to follow.
That's clever. Very nice.
But maybe that's not it. Maybe they just fucking like the railroad, man. I don't know. I'm trying to find something deeper in a movie that I don't know is about anything deeper. It's just supposed to be depressing. So then we get Nick Cage singing a song called Tangerine into a mop or broom, I can't remember, something along those lines, and dancing in the bowling alley after hours. They're cleaning up. I'm pretty sure that Hopper is there as well. And it's just this really out of place scene. I'm glad it's in there. Don't get me wrong. The dance that Nick Cage does is worth it, but it was just a really weird scene.
Yeah.
maybe the most likable we've seen Nick Cage in this movie to this point. But
Well, because like he's charismatic, right? It's how he's able to like get women and stuff like that, right?
clearly.
But so he can be very likable. He can be a nice guy.
Great hair in this movie too.
Yeah. Yeah.
His hair looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I do. I feel like I comment on his hair a lot in this podcast, but it's an important part of his character.
Well, what was he like 20 when this came out? Let's see.
Yeah, he was young.
I forget.
He looked very young. And so, yeah, my next note was WTF was that dance. Because it's literally like a super weird dance. It's not a real dance that's ever happened. It's just him like doing something with his body that I don't even know if he knew what he was doing, knew what he was doing at that point. But
just improvising.
It was great. I loved it. So the next scene we have notated, I'm sure we saw some other scenes in there, but Hopper and Caddy are like going shopping, or like they're hanging out together and they go shopping, and they see the shoe store. And she sees some shoes in the window, and she like starts freaking out about how beautiful they are. But honestly, those shoes were really, really stupid and like ugly looking, in my opinion. Now, maybe in the 40s they were in fashion. These look dumb as hell.
Like, man, back in the 40s, all you had were Chucks.
I maybe that's true. I wasn't alive then, so who knows? But I'm assuming that's not true. But yeah, these shoes were not good looking. Did you like those shoes, Derek?
I had no real opinion.
They were like blue, but they're a major point in this movie. I mean, they spend a lot of time talking about these shoes.
She liked them. They made her happy. Like, I only really care about shoes if I have to wear them. Otherwise,
they were like shiny metallic blue.
Yeah, very fancy.
Had like a split up the middle. It was very weird design.
They were $25 whole.
They were, and they talked to the cobbler, and he's like, "What a great deal, right?" And they're like, okay, we'll be back later.
I wish I could buy some shoes for $25.
Yeah. Here, I've still got my calculator pulled up. Let's see what $25 is.
I'm curious. I am actually curious because shoes today.
$478.70.
Oh, well, by that logic, shoes today are a steal.
I don't know. I pay $60 for my shoes, and I buy the same pair every time. So
that's what I'm saying, right? So like, that's a lot cheaper than $400.
But I mean, as somebody who sells handmade things, handmade stuff is more expensive, and you can't just go into a cobbler shop nowadays and get custom made shoes.
That's not where you get your shoes?
Not generally, no. But yeah, so I mean, these were handmade shoes, and obviously it's going to be more expensive. But yeah, this is where you start to see the cracks in the story for Hopper, that maybe she's not this rich person, because when he says $25 and she just walks out, he's like, well, why didn't you buy those shoes? And she's like, well, they were $25. And he's like,
can't buy everything you want.
Yeah, it's like this whole thing about how he still thinks she's rich. And is this the scene where they come out and say it? No. Because they still have to do the pool hustling.
Yep.
And so Nikki's next plan is to try and hustle some infantrymen of some branch Navy, some Navy men out of pool money. Well, it turns out, big surprise, you couldn't have seen this coming, that the Navy guys were also hustlers, and could easily be, it was a close competition, but it was not a problem for them to beat our two heroes, if you want to call them that.
It was a very long pool montage. I'll say that.
So my next note, well, I had pool hustling, and I said, when are they going to ask Gatsby for dollars? Because I assumed that was coming. And then I said, is this a pool movie now? Because we literally spent 20 minutes watching this pool game.
Because it takes forever, like first to 100. I'm like, why 100?
And we see like every single point up to 100. So,
oh my God, it takes forever.
Yes. And then, of course, after this happens, he shows up late to his own birthday party, where Caddy was waiting, because Caddy had been invited to his birthday party.
And this is when it all comes out. Nikki is angry, right? Because they didn't get their money. They almost got beat up by these guys.
Right. They did lose like $8 or something, because they threw a lot of money, but it was mostly fake.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm curious where they got all the fake money in 1942. It's not like, it wasn't Monopoly money. So I'm just curious.
That's true.
But yeah, Nikki's all mad that Hopper won't just out and ask her. And so the two of them are alone on the patio, and he
He's like, I
explains the
need this
situation.
money. Yeah, I need this money. Um, for for an abortion. Nikki got this girl pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And she, bless her heart, says she'll see what she can do. She doesn't want to give away that she's not rich to this guy who thinks she's rich. And she starts having kind of an existential crisis of like, you know, does he only like me because he thinks I have money, and anything else you would expect in this kind of circumstance.
Except that like there's a timer on everything because these guys are going off to war in like a couple of weeks.
Right.
So like at this point, like tell him you're not rich. Who cares? He's going to be gone in 2 weeks.
Right. So I don't have notes on this part, but it is important because it's kind of the wrapping of whatever plot is in this movie, or whatever story is a part of this movie, which is not part of a plot necessarily. So she decides that the best option is to try and steal this pearl necklace from the Gatsby house that her mom works at.
Right. So her mother and her live in this house. Her mother's the maid, right? And she's become really friendly with the daughter of the parents who own the place. And they kind of act like friends. And she's really nice. Like they do treat them well and everything. Like
yeah, they buy them clothes and things
mm-hmm.
like that as gifts.
I mean, it certainly seems like they're nice people, right? Who are just using their money.
Right.
But yeah, so Caddy's going to steal this pearl necklace that we see earlier in the movie.
Yeah, and she gets caught by the person she's the friend with, and they have this whole like she starts crying, getting emotional, telling her about this boy, and does he only like her because he thinks she has money, and she says, "We'll get you the money." And so
man, I would have loved to see that conversation. How did she get $150? Because I mean, even back then, rich or not, $150 is a lot of money in 1942. So where did she get that? Did she ask her parents for it? What was the story? I want to see that.
I don't know, but they give her the money,
right? Like she was being a good friend.
They give her the money, and my next note is Nikki ruins everything around him.
Yes.
And then this got real dark because then we get a dark scene driving to the abortion place, which is a trailer.
Mm-hmm. So a trailer park.
Yeah. Talking about how they got to get this won't take very long. Nikki says, so the girl goes in and nobody else goes in with her. And then Caddy's like, go in with her. And she had said to Nikki that she doesn't want Nikki in there.
Right.
So Caddy goes in with her and watches this girl have this abortion procedure. And while they're outside, Nikki's like, I guess this doesn't take very long because they have another appointment at 11. This seems like really good money.
Yeah, right. 150 on, like, a pop
fiscal,
or whatever.
Yeah, he seems like he's really concerned about the fiscal, things going on with this place and how much money could be had.
He's just so flippant about the whole thing. He seems completely unconcerned.
Right. And so she comes out crying, obviously traumatized, and they are all driving back in relative silence, but drinking and driving, which, is really great. There's a lot of that in this movie too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think they drop the girl off at her house.
Mm-hmm. Caddy and Hopper help walk her in. Nikki doesn't even leave the car.
He stays in the car. And they go back to the car and they get in a fight. Hopper and Caddy kind of get into an argument, and she says to pull the car over, and Caddy just starts walking away in the darkness, and Hopper gets kind of abusive at this point. He's like grabbing her. She's trying to walk away, and he keeps grabbing her.
He's like, I'm talking to you, and like he's very aggressive, very like demanding, and like completely like it's almost a completely different personality.
Yes.
Than what we've seen throughout the rest of the movie. It's messed up.
And keep in mind, there's only like 10 minutes left in the movie at this point.
Yeah.
And so my next note is, again, what is the plot of this movie? Because is the whole plot getting in trying to have a bunch of shenanigans, trying to get money for an abortion? Because that's a fucked up plot.
I mean, to me, it just seems like a series of events that happen over 6 weeks. That's the plot of the movie.
With no, real character growth or anything like that. So then you're going to get the resolution, of course, so that they can end up happy together forever. and he makes her a treasure map, like before he's about to be recruited or be enlisted. And so the treasure map leads to the shoes, which are like buried in a box underneath a tree or something like that. And when she goes to pick up the shoes, he's sitting around the corner. And they apologize to each other, which I don't know what she was apologizing for, but they kind of like make up. And the next scene shows them at the train, Nikki and Hopper at the train, like
Well,
ready
there
to
is the
leave.
scene where Hopper does go see Nikki at the bowling alley, and the two of them make up because they have a big blowout
because they
fight
had a
too.
blowout too. Yeah, and so they go and make up, and then they're gonna go leave on a leave to go to the military together, and everybody's like, oh, there's like a sad goodbye, like, oh, take care of yourself. You know, this girl who's in love with Hopper apparently now is, you know, really worried. And so they're like, you better get on the train. It's about to leave. And there's like 6 warnings about this train about to leave. And instead they're all just standing there and the train takes off. And then we get a look between Nikki and Hopper, and then they just start chasing the train, because that's like a reference to something earlier in the movie, which doesn't really have any significance.
None.
So
other than they can catch the train. Good for them.
Yeah. And my last note was, what if they didn't catch the train?
Then they'd be in legal trouble.
Yeah, but they do, because that's the happy ending of the movie, is them going off to the military to die in the war, I guess.
I mean, we that's the thing, right? We have no idea what happens to them. So,
well, we know how that war went.
And a lot of people died.
Yes. So, I mean, and probably a lot of Marines died.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's likely that if they came back, that they were not only traumatized and PTSD, but they probably could have been missing limbs.
Sure.
You know, it's just not a happy ending.
But like to your point
movie,
though, right? Like we don't even get any of that wrap up really. They just go. The movie starts that they got 6 weeks to go, and then the movie ends and they go. And everything that happens in the middle seems to have zero impact on any on any of the main characters. The only person truly impacted is Sally, and we don't really get to know her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's I don't have much nice to say, many nice things to say about this movie. I don't know how you watched it twice. I would say that I was less bored during this movie than Cotton Club, but probably only because of how fucked up it was, and the fact that I was just like in shock that they would make this movie even in 1984. Like, who financed this and thought it would be a good movie and a successful movie?
I think that's fair. I mean, the truth is I watched it by accident like 4 or 5 months ago, and I didn't think I remembered it well enough to, you know, be able to talk about it well for an hour. So I didn't feel like I had a choice. Yeah.
I mean, that's fair, but it's,
it was my fault for mistakenly watching it the first time. I didn't want the conversation to suffer because of that.
I'm guessing that they made this movie because Sean Penn was tied to it.
I mean, that was a big part of it. Yeah.
At this point, that he'd been in a good amount of movies and was a little bit of a hot commodity.
Yeah.
So, whereas Nick Cage wasn't really at this point. That's the only thing I can think of as to why maybe they made this movie, but I don't know. Even that seems like a stretch, because you can't just say, well, maybe in the 80s you could say, well, we got this guy attached, you know, and the movie looks like crap. Let's do it. You know, they had to have like read the script at some point, or a synopsis. Of course, it's a synopsis they gave was in 1942, California, 2 young men await induction into the U.S. Marines and say goodbye to their girlfriends. Then I guess maybe that was a little bit easier to pitch than, you know, the whole abortion storyline.
Yeah, it is kind of strange. I don't really have a great explanation for any of that at all, really. Supposedly, according to some of the notes and stuff, Sean Penn and McGovern were just super into the movie. They were really sold on the premise and all that jazz. And so maybe it sounded better on paper.
I don't know how that could even sound good on paper, but you know what? The fact is it got made regardless. And here we are today reviewing it.
Yeah, that's fair. A couple interesting notes. Sean Penn and Elizabeth McGovern actually got engaged after this movie. They met on this movie and ended up having a relationship together that didn't last, but that's the thing. And Dana Carvey is in this movie, and I've looked for him both times, and I can't figure out who he is, but he is in this movie.
Nice. I did see his name in the credits, and I'm thinking it's got to be a different Dana Carvey.
No, it's Dana Carvey. I looked it up.
Okay.
Yeah, it is Dana Carvey. But he plays a character named Babyface, and I'm not sure who that is. But
yeah, I don't know either.
For all I know, it's one of the Navy guys or something, like one of the guys that was sitting back at the bar that we didn't get a good look at. I don't know. But there you go. So a couple little interesting tidbits there. But yeah, that's the movie. So now we got to rate it. So for those who are new to the show, we rate our movies on two different scales, quality and caginess, 0 through 20 on both, because we have a lot of movies to cover. And 0 is low, 20 is high. Ryan, let's mix things up here a little bit. Let's start with caginess. We usually start with quality. Let's start with caginess. Where would you rate this movie on caginess?
I mean, low. It had like the one scene that was cagey. I honestly feel like these early movies, Nick Cage hadn't really figured out like what he liked about acting. I mean, he knew he liked acting, but he hadn't really, or maybe he just wasn't a big enough name to make like big, bold choices like he did in a lot of movies that got him famous.
Mm-hmm.
So the caginess is low. In this movie, I would say like that one dance scene is probably the only cagey part. And I clearly couldn't have been that cagey because you don't even remember it.
Yeah, I don't.
And you've watched it twice.
I have.
So I want to make sure I keep bringing that point up. So probably like a 4.
Oh, 4. Okay.
It was very low. I mean, there's other movies that we reviewed, like Joe, for example, that are basically no caginess, and I want it to be higher than those movies because that dance scene was pretty great, but it's still not enough to really sell me on the movie. I would say just like YouTube that one scene if you're really interested.
That's fair. Well, I was going to give it a 3.
Okay, so we're close.
So yeah, we're right there. All right, so now we got quality. So I'll go first on quality, I guess. I mean, it's not very good. It's kind of well acted, I guess. It's not particularly interesting from a cinematography standpoint or any other technical standpoint. So like, it's really hard for me to give this.
I mean, it was a period piece, and it was believably a period piece. They did a good job with that.
That's true. That's
a technical point. And to your point, I did think the acting was fine. I mean, everybody in there was pretty good. I didn't have anything that was like, this actor did a really bad job.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's fair. I mean, it certainly looks like the 1940s. The most interesting parts about it are the fact that it's the 1940s, like the bowling alley and the soda shop. Some of the stuff on the cemetery was kind of interesting. The things I didn't really know, like when the ground is too cold, they put like burning coals over where the plot would be to help them dig. That was interesting. Like things like that were the more interesting parts of the movie for me. Sure. So I think I'm going to give it, a 6.
What did I give Cotton Club?
Maybe a 7. I'm going to give it a 7. You gave Cotton Club an 8. I gave it also an 8. So I'm giving this a 7.
Well, I mean, I'd rather rewatch this than Cotton Club, but even despite all the dark storylines and stuff. I mean, Cotton Club was fine. It was just really boring for me. I'm not into that type of movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was tough for me to get through. I'm probably going to put it the same as I did Cotton Club.
An 8.
Well, what did you give it?
I gave it a 7.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably right on there with you. I mean, I don't think it was as good, like as well made of a movie as Cotton Club was, but I would rather watch this movie than Cotton Club because at least I wasn't bored during this movie.
Yeah, so I think that's
I'd give
fair.
it a 7. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to put it a 7 also.
I mean, I think that's fair. Like we gave Cotton Club an 8. And like we gave Next, you gave it a 6 and I gave it a 7. I'd rather watch Next than Cotton Club.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's a lot of movies that we rated lower. Even like Joe and some of those, I'd probably watch before I watch Cotton Club again.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I think Joe we rated pretty high from a quality standpoint.
Well, it was a well-made and good movie.
It's just not cagey.
Right.
But all right. Well, so that gives us a 7 on overall quality and a 3.5 on caginess. And so the last bit of business is we have to find out what Nicolas Cage movie is going to join our wheel and replace Racing with the Moon. And that movie is Kill Chain. So Kill Chain is going to join the wheel. So if you want to find out what Nicolas Cage movie we're talking about next time on the show, go to comingofcage.com or follow us at Coming of Cage to find the Wheel O Cage spin for episode 23 of the show. Ryan, anything else for Racing with the Moon?
I'm glad we're done with it.
I am too. I hope to never have to watch it a third time. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Derek. That was Ryan. We're the Coming of Cage podcast. We will be back in 2 weeks. See you then.
See ya.